Coming up on this week's episode of the Wisden Cricket Weekly Podcast. West Indies made England work hard for their victory in the second test at Trent Bridge.
Day 2 was one of the best days of test cricket that I've seen for a long time.
Harry, Brook and Joe Root were at their very, very best.
You could tell almost immediately from Joe that he's like, this is a flat pitch. I am scoring 100 here.
Shoaib Bashir showed that he is the real deal with a fourth innings 5-wicket haul.
He's got more fifers for England than any Englishman before turning 21 ever. But he averages 70 in the championship this year. How does that make sense?
There's discussion around the 100 as it gears up for its fourth season.
It all just feels very messy, and I guess the 100 has sort of always felt a little bit like that, a little bit sort of confused.
And Ireland's Harry Tector joins us as they prepare to take on Zimbabwe in a one-off test.
It's the pinnacle of our game, and we're very lucky to get the opportunity to play it. For me, I think it's the ultimate test as a player.
All that and more over the next 80 minutes.
This summer, Wisden are proudly being sponsored by Kia UK. Kia are leading the way in electrification with their groundbreaking range of EVs. Kia have taken strides in the future of mobility with their award-winning lineup, including the EV9 and EV6. They also have a commitment to movement that inspires and want to help cricket fans get closer to the action. Listen every week for Kia's Movement That Inspires moment for chances to win exciting experiences at the Kia Oval this summer. Hello and welcome to the Wisden Cricket Weekly Podcast. For the first time since December 2022, England have won a test series. They beat West Indies in a properly hard-fought four-dayer at Trent Bridge, one that was properly in the balance until the visitors collapsed in a heap in the final session. There's also the start of the 100. Ireland have another test match as well. We'll be hearing from their star young batter, Harry Tector, later in the show. I'm Yas Rana, and with me today are Ben, Gardner and Jim Wallace. But first, let's go to Mark Butcher for his thoughts on the test. Butcher went quite big picture on last week's pod, so I thought we'd go particularly crickety today. Did we see a refinement from England in the second innings? I know they got 400 in the first, but there were a few really soft dismissals and the pitch was extremely flat, not dissimilar to the 2022 pitch, I thought, where New Zealand lost despite scoring 553 in their first innings.
Well, I mean, yeah, I thought in the first innings, I thought they probably could have made more than 416. With all those guys getting in and finding ways to get themselves out. I thought that day 2 was one of the best days of test cricket that I've seen for a long time. I thought it was fantastic. I think England threw absolutely everything at the West Indies. You know, we were very good, and yet, you know, the West Indies got through to the close in pretty good shape and ended up making a lead. I thought it was fantastic. Wood bowled magnificently, great theatre with that, and obviously the speed. I thought Bashir did a brilliant job on a very, very flat pitch with not much to work with. Wokes got better and better through that innings. Atkinson was very good. Stokes was his usual imaginative self. And then you had the two Dominicans who kind of stood there and not only withstood it all, and we wondered whether or not the West Indies would have the skill or the daring to kind of throw some punches back at England, and eventually they did do that and got themselves a 41-run lead. I thought it was a brilliant. You know, the whole day was brilliant. England's batting in the third innings of the game was very, very clinical, very skillful and very clinical. Because the West Indies by now have just started in terms of their bowling attack anyway with Shamar Joseph, or the two Josephs actually sort of not quite there yet, but Jaden Seales started to look like he was coming into some real sort of rhythm and form. They had their best sort of spell in the field under lights on, what was it, the evening, and sort of day 3 made life very difficult for England, and yet England still was scoring at sort of 4 runs and over with Brook and Root. And I asked Ben Stokes at the post-match presentation about that sort of approach, and whether they'd sort of spoken about tempering some of the egregious risk-taking that they've had in various other times, particularly when they've already got their noses in front. And he said, yeah, Ed said it's part of the sort of maturing of the team to be able to still have the skill to keep the scoreboard moving forward, but do it in a slightly less reckless way. So yeah, I thought it was a terrific performance, and you just knew, it kind of felt like it in the evening when England were bowled out, that West Indies had kind of expended so much energy and heart to sort of stay in the game for that long, that there was half a chance that if a wicket or two went down quickly, that the whole pack of cards could collapse. And thus it happened. And the pitch, actually, you mentioned the pitch being very, very flat. My feeling was right from the very start that if we had 4 dry days or whatever it was, that by the time we got to the back end of day 4, that you would start to get some up and down stuff. There were some holes made when the pitch was soft on day 1. It got baked nice and hard, and lo and behold, you did start to see some variances in bounce. So England played the game perfectly. West Indies played a massive part in it, but in the end, England were just too strong.
I just wanted to pick you up on the phenomenon almost of collapsing in the 4th inning when a test match has been really close and really difficult for 3.5 days. It's something that England have done quite a lot of, actually, in the last 5-10 years. I wondered, drawing on your own experience, I can't think of a specific test match, but I'm sure you would have been in an England team that did that once or twice. Is it just because of how draining it is to be in a contest against a team that is throwing everything at you for 3.5 days, that actually when you come in on a hot day, when you're knackered, it can be very easy to crumble as a team? Yeah,
it's exactly that. The effort, particularly when the team that you're playing against is better than you. I mean, and you make no bones about it, England are a better team man for man than the West Indies, and have a lot more experience, and they're playing at home. So all of the dials were pointed very much in England's direction, and the West Indies did themselves proud over the course of the most of the 3.5 days. And it just got to that point whereby all it was going to take was a little extra shove, and down they would go. And it's tough. It's really hard, because a couple of things. There was a really long last session, obviously, because they went off for an early tea. So that last session kind of gives you very little. So you're not looking at that session going, okay, well we get through an hour and a half here. Maybe we're only 2 down. We can regroup, get a night's kip, come back tomorrow fresh, and beginning of the day, and got to sort of get ourselves back into the game again. They had to, what was 3 and a bit hours, wasn't it, slated for that final session, or 3 hours, I think. And there's kind of no escaping from that. They got off to a terrific start, which they've done actually in 3 of the 4 innings, I think, in the series so far. But once that first wicket went down, and once Wood was bowling again with the incredible speed and control that he showed throughout the whole test match, and of course Bashir then came into his own by bowling against a lineup that could, a long way away from home, a long time to survive. The odd ball starts to turn a little bit, and that was it. The pressure ended up being too great. Not to mention a big shout out to Chris Woakes also for the way that he bowled in that second innings, making those breakthroughs and doing a terrific job, I think, in terms of utilising the new ball and applying pressure for the guys that were coming on behind him.
Yeah, you're right about the pitch breaking up on day 4. I thought there were signs, even when Root and Brook were batting, that the odd ball was keeping low, and there were signs of what was to come later on. I thought Root and Brook, actually, as well as England played on day 3, they were still in a relatively precarious position at the start of day 4. So the way those two knuckled down and capitalised on their starts was really important. On Brook, I thought his second innings knock was outstanding, especially in contrast to the first innings, because in the first innings I felt like he was just trying to hit everything. Whereas everything he was, I think he was only scoring at around about 80 or 90, but he was finding the ring all the time, and it was like there wasn't that much. There weren't different levels to the innings, but there were in the second. Our video editor and social media man Dan Senior described him as the best of basically every England right-handed batter that he would have grown up watching. So Root stabs, KP's power and swagger and flicky stuff, a slightly uglier Ian Bell cover drive, the Joss Butler wrist. He really does have everything, doesn't he?
He does. He's incredibly special. I mean, the contrast, I suppose, between the two of them was that you could tell almost immediately from Joe that he's like, this is a flat pitch. I am scoring 100 here. I'm scoring 100. And I'm not giving this one away. There's going to be no nonsense. I am going to make 100. And with Brook, the range of shot making, the sort of imagination that he has around run scoring, the skill, the power, The athleticism, actually, the way he moves is incredible. He's just almost balletic on his feet as a batsman. And you also see it in the field as well. I mean, the catch he took off Bashir to get rid of Mikael Louis in the first innings, and some of the stuff around the boundary edge. He just moves beautifully. And when you can do that with a bat in your hand as well, and kind of make it look so pleasing, and also be so devastatingly effective, is terrific. He's a wonderful, wonderful player. And it was great to see him. It was great to see him do what we've kind of been wanting England's batting lineup to do for a little while, and that is, okay, it's great, right? Entertain us, wonderful. We're all very happy to see that. But get yourselves into a winning position, or find yourself into a position where the game is in the balance. Do you have the sort of the will to actually forgo a little bit of the entertainment side and actually do the job, which is to get your team into a position where you can win the game? And they did it. Brilliant.
He's obviously ridiculously talented. There were some shots were just outrageous. The sort of ramp over, when it's a short ball just outside off stump, he just ramps over third for six is ridiculous. Because actually they're quite often like pretty well directed short balls. But when you have players as talented, you naturally make comparisons, right? And I was thinking, what does he compare to the best English batters that I've seen over the years? And I was looking back at Root's career. Root was 25, about the same age Brook is now, during the 2015 Ashes, where he was, even at that age, England's most important player, and it was his hundreds that would define series. And I feel like Brook has the talent, but right now he's not the one you'd like absolutely hang your hat on in the same way that you probably did with a Joe Root at a similar age. But I also wonder if that's just a team role thing, because Joe Root's still there. Joe Root still is Joe Root and plays the Joe Root role, that his role is slightly different.
Yeah, possibly. And also, don't forget that he's played nearly all of his England career in the Bazball era as well. So they've kind of had a slightly different thought process to going about it. I guess that the one thing, if you're going to make those comparisons, the one thing is that Harry Brook has yet to sort of start to consistently make runs in sort of match-defining causes. He's made brilliant innings or whatever. But I think yesterday was one of the. I suppose it's a bit harsh, because in order to win those games in Pakistan, you had to be able to do what he can do, which very few other people can. So maybe that's not 100% correct. But I thought yesterday was kind of, that was games in the balance, can go either way. And those two, in their differing ways, sort of absolutely seized the game and won the game for England, with not only brilliant and eye-catching stroke play, but also a slight ruthless streak about it as well.
Yeah, I guess there was the Headingley run chase last year as well, where Brook pretty much took England over the line in a difficult chase. But yeah, I just absolutely love watching those two bat. It was an absolute joy. There was a ridiculous start to the game, Butch, Crawley falling early on, and then England breaking basically every run scoring record going in the first hour. Duckett was the chief architect of that early destruction. I think it's particularly notable when you watch his highlights, how there's really not very much wrong with a lot of the balls that he sends to the fence. He must be an absolute nightmare to bowl to when he's on song.
He does look like it. West Indies had a very, very short period of about 10 or 11 balls where they made him less definite, shall we say. They sort of put that ring field in on the offside with catching gullies and sort of wide-ish slips and men catching in front of square on the offside, and then bowled it wide, one fielder back on the fence. And for about 10 or 11 balls, Duckett sort of like was not fully flourishing or fully committed to hitting the gap or hitting the ball to the boundary. And then inexplicably, just as it was starting to look like he was getting frustrated and trying to shovel wide balls over into the leg side, Jayden Seales went over the wicket instead of round and completely messed the whole thing up again, got him going again. And that, just trying to stop the guy from scoring is an absolute nightmare. They had a little window of how they might go about it, but then abandoned it before it had paid dividends. In the end, was it Alzari Joseph spiked him with that excellent Yorker. But he's phenomenal, isn't he? The stats around the percentage, 2% of balls bowled at him, he leaves. It's just ridiculous.
I know that Australia got shit for starting with a cover point to England at the start of last Ashes, but do you think that is the way to take on Crawley and Duckett? Just cut off as many boundary scoring options as possible early on, because Duckett in particular, he is always looking for it.
Yeah, potentially. I think though, if you are going to do that you kind of, a little bit like England do when they go to the short ball ploy, you kind of need to commit to it all in. And I think what becomes very difficult for bowlers is if your captain has a little, has a bob each way with the field. You might have, so if you've got one back on the point boundary and one back on the deep backward square leg boundary, what's your line? Because even your good balls then go for one, right? And bowlers hate that. So it's either, you commit to going, if you're going to go to Duckett, we're going to pack the offside field, we're going to have those catches in, we're going to have one back on the fence, and we're going to bowl it into the channel and say, okay, go on then. But to kind of do what West Indies did for much of the first innings and what Australia did throughout the Ashes, which is to kind of like just spread them out, kind of, it does, I think anyway, I would feel as though I had such a lack of control as a captain, and England have proven over the course of time that they'll go 4 or 5 runs and over without scoring boundaries anyway. If you give them the opportunity, you have to kind of narrow it down a little bit more than that. But at the moment, he's just in wonderful nick. I mean, let's take absolutely nothing away from him. He's playing magnificently. Balance is great. Some of the on drives, they're the most eye-catching things really, because then his weight is not. He's not sort of second guessing that they're going to be bowling wide at me. His balance is perfect. He's able to move forwards and backwards and hit the ball square and sort of drilling it back past the stumps, which is not what Zach Crawley wants to see at the moment. Tells you that he's just batting in a very pure mode at the moment. It's all very instinctive.
Yeah, it's a good point about what happens when the field drops. So if you look at the England sort of boundary percentage across the 2 innings, in the first innings, Duckett scored 56 of his 71 runs in boundaries. Harry Brook scored 26 of his 36 in boundaries. If you look at the second innings, Joe Root hit 40 out of 122 in boundaries, and Brook actually only 52 of 109. So actually, you push the fielders out. England are very happy to just milk the opposition.
And to be fair to the West Indies again on that, is that potentially they might not have been a year ago. So that was a change from England as well. And like so I kind of remember looking at the fruit machine on comms and going, this has been a sort of a much more sedate. West Indies have had a really good spell here, and Brook and Root are being made to work. And I looked at the scoring rate, and it was 4.8. It was the highest it had been for England in the match. And they weren't smoking it to all parts, which gives you sort of an idea as to how skillful that partnership was and how low risk it was, despite it being so fast scoring.
Important start to the summer for Ollie Pope. There was a bit of pressure on him coming into the summer, a difficult end to that India tour, and then a difficult start to the summer with Surrey. He played quite a lot of championship games without getting a significant score. Have you sensed anything different in his game at the start of this summer? 170 odd runs in this test match following that 50 at Lords.
No, not really. No, not at all. I think that can happen. I'm pretty sure that there wouldn't have been any pressure on him from within the dressing room after India, or after the sort of slow start in the county championship. I mean, after all, Shoaib Bashir doesn't play for Somerset in the championship, but he's our number 1 spinner, so I'm not sure they're paying much attention to that. I don't. I mean, he got a bit of luck, didn't he, in the first innings? Got dropped a couple of times, but again, there's something about Ollie Pope and what happens when he gets himself in. He has become sort of a very sort of hungry run maker, and is also capable of playing those sort of astonishing innings as we saw in India. I just think, again, he's another player who's sort of like still very much at the infancy of his career, and he's kind of working out Test match cricket as he goes along. And the fact that he's had so many impactful knocks in such a relatively short space of time as a Test match player, just means that he will grow into sort of doing that on a more consistent basis. But I think it was a welcome thing for him. And everybody performed in the team. I don't think there was a single person that you could pick out, with the exception of poor old Zach, who didn't make a significant contribution in the Test match. And Ollie's over the 2 innings were just shaded him for the player of the match award.
And finally, is Shoaib Bashir the real deal?
Yeah, I think so. I think you could see it even in the first innings. I think it's sort of towards the back end when the ball was flying around a little bit more. He lost a little bit of consistency, dragged a few balls down, but I think there was enough on show when the pitch was flat as anything and not turning at all, that he had the control and the variety in terms of flight and whatever to be a very, very good bowler. And then of course you give him that situation in the second innings where there is now some rough, there is some wear, and there is some turn, and you see how bloody difficult he can be to play because of height, pace, bounce. Very, very, very happy to be able to kind of wrap his hand around the ball and get it to go away from the right-handed bowler, an attacking line when he's got something to work with. But he's also good enough to hold it nice and tight lines, middle and leg, and give his captains some control when there's nothing happening. And he's also got a brilliant captain in Ben Stokes to work with, because he's very sympathetic, I think, as a captain, but also understands how to allow you to bowl good balls that don't get knocked for ones. And batters can't just sort of just sit there and milk you and make you feel like you're not kind of having any effect at all. He's able to bowl. He's able to bowl tightly enough, and his captain is able to set fields which allow his good balls not to go for runs, meaning that batters then have to have a little bit of a dip at him, which they're encouraged to do because Stokes won't put the field back. And it's a great combination, having the skill from the bowler's hand, but also having a captain who understands how that whole thing works. And they might make a very good partnership between them going forward.
Can you make sense of the fact that Bashir averages 29 for England? He's got as many Test match 5-wicket hauls as Andrew Flintoff. He's got more fifers for England than any Englishman before turning 21 ever. But he averages 70 in the Championship this year. Like, how does that make sense?
I don't know. I honestly don't know. But you only have to watch him bowl to see how skillful he is and how much better he could become.
It feels like he's very well coached. He's very well coached during the game. Jeetan Patel, the England spin coach, often is at fine leg, sort of coaching Bashir through the spell. You could see in the field, like Joe Root looks after him very well. It's not just Stokes; they're all coming to him with ideas and stuff. So it feels like the management is very, very careful.
He obviously is able to sort of take on information very, very quickly. And isn't one of those guys who kind of gets flustered by being asked to do things. If Ben Stokes says to him, "Can you bowl 2 feet outside the off stump?" He's able to do that. It's not, my action doesn't let me do it, or I don't like bowling that line. So he has the skill. He's like an empty canvas at the moment, just being, and information is being fed into him. He's able to do what is required in the situation, and is quite happy to do it as well. I think that's the other side of it. It's perhaps an advantage of not having played a massive amount, is that you don't have any preconceived ideas about what it is that you do, and what people are asking you to do is incorrect. But having said all of that, you also need to have the strength and the skill to be able to pull it off. And he has that in bundles. He really does. In terms of thinking about the dismissal, which one of the left-handers was it? I don't remember now.
Was it Athenaeus, the one that was a genuine snick to slip?
Yeah. I mean, it's gorgeous delivery. Dipped, it dropped on him. He kind of ended up just pushing at it a little bit. It turned just enough. Joe Root takes an excellent catch. That's the sort of thing. It's the sort of thing that made Graham Swann such a great bowler. You kind of get lots and lots of energy on the ball. The batter thinks he knows where it's landing, and it's 6 inches further away from him than you think. And if you have that as a spin bowler, you don't need the pitches to be ragging square. That deceit in terms of flight and dip and topspin is a huge, huge part of it. It's not something that I think Jack Leach has ever had, and it's something that Shoaib Bashir definitely has right from the very outset. So good luck to him, because I think he's going to go well.
Well, good luck to him indeed. Butch, cheers for your time. Catch you next week. For this episode's Kia's Movement That Inspires moment, Kia, proud sponsors of the Kia Oval, are giving you the chance to attend England-Sri Lanka this September. Be it the final test of the British summer, where England will look to sign it off on a positive note. To win a pair of tickets to Day 2 on September the 7th, all you need to do is enter via the link in the description. So it is England's first series victory since December 2022, and I was trying to think of major world events that have happened since. And all I had was that Rishi Sunak was the Prime Minister, Gareth Southgate was the England manager, and Joe Biden was the assumed Democratic nominee for the US election. But that's all happened the last couple of weeks. Ben, you've got your own list of stuff that's happened since England last won a Test series.
Yeah, well, what felt like the big event for me in the last year or so was just Barbenheimer. So that had happened. But to be honest, I think the best examples are all cricketing ones. When England last won a Test series, Shoaib Bashir was yet to make his professional debut. Gus Atkinson had 25 first-class wickets, and England were newly crowned dual men's white ball world champions.
Newly crowned as well, yeah. Jim, that was hard yakka for England for the most part. 5 hours into day 4, West Indies needed 320 odd with 10 wickets in hand, and Craig Brathwaite was on a run of ball 47.
Yeah, I actually got on a train and there was 0 wickets down, and when I got off the train 2.5 hours later, it was pretty much all over.
Yeah.
So it was 10 wickets since the drinks break.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was, and I also saw someone say that it was like a 1-1 draw heading into sort of the 82nd minute, and then a team loses 4-1. And it did feel a bit like that. But, England, credit to them, they stuck in there and they bowled really well. Bashir bowled well. The West Indies didn't quite apply themselves as well as they did in the first innings. But it was it was so much better than Lords. I was at Lords watching that, and that really felt like with the whole Anderson goodbye as well, a bit of a weird Test match, whereas the Trent Bridge one was definitely a contest for 3 and a bit days. And then, England sort of, I guess with the scoreboard pressure as well, they probably got a few too many and then got on a roll, and that's what can happen.
Yeah, days 2 and 3 were particularly good, I thought. Day 1 was also had that same Lord's weirdness in that it was a very flat pitch. England got a good score, but you felt like England left a lot of runs out there. And West Indies didn't actually bowl that well. West Indies really came into their own as the Test progressed with both bat and ball. Even when England got runs, it felt like they were bowling with as much control as they have done this series.
Yeah, it felt like England batted quite a lot better to make a similar total on in the second innings than the first innings. And there was also after that last wicket partnership, we should probably talk about the circumstances around that, because it has been a continuous issue for England. But then when that happens, and then Crawley gets sort of run out off the bowler's finger at the non-striker's end, and you think this feels like it could be heading for something really quite fun. England did manage to then negotiate that. But yeah, West Indies grew into the game and have grown into the series. And there's been a bit of sort of chat being like, oh, how could, people went too overboard after the Lord's Test that, Chris or going hard in on West Indies. But I feel like that was the point most of us were making, right? Was that this is a good team with so many, with talented players, and they're not given the best chance. And that was the issue with the Lords, was they were just you could see that they were going to get better. You can tell because of, how they've gone in previous series and what we know these guys like. They just weren't given the chance in terms of the preparation coming into the game. And I don't really know how they can still, produce players who are this good. I think that when Kavem Hodge and Athanaze were putting on 150 on day 2, and these guys, so both from Dominica, which is like an island with the same population as basically like St. Albans. And if you picked out the two best,
similar weather as well.
Yeah, if you picked out the 2 best guys at cricket from St. Albans and told them to go and put on 150 in a Test match against Mark Wood, I'm not sure that would happen. But yeah, it was that, and day 3 was just like a proper day of Test cricket where you had swings to and fro throughout the day. And in a way, it's sort of a shame how it ended, especially with Trent Bridge, putting on free tickets on day 5 and it somehow ends before day 4 and but yeah, that is kind of credit to England that they do have bowlers that can just run through a side, and with West Indies it kind of all just ended very quickly, I guess.
They just looked it is a shame, yeah, as you say, they just looked undercooked, with Shamar keep going down with cramp and stuff, and you saw it with Wokes. He's not played a great deal of cricket in the past few months for whatever reason, and he was off the boil completely in at Lords. Didn't look particularly potent at all, and in the first innings at Trent Bridge, and then in the second innings he looked a lot more on it, and that's purely because he'd have been getting back into the groove. So it is a shame that maybe it's not a 4-test series or a 5-test series, or that the West Indies had more of a chance to warm up and get a bit more match fit before it started.
Yeah, I thought it was a very Chris Wokes Test match at home. 6 wickets in the game, 50 odd runs, and quite important actually in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah,
it does feel like a shame that West Indies have come into it so undercooked. I thought it was such a resilient display with both bat and ball, because actually it was really flat. I mentioned it to Butch previously, but it reminded me a lot of the Trent Bridge pitched 2 years ago for the New Zealand Test, where New Zealand lost the Test with 550. So even though England, there was that mad stat that went round that this is the first time England have ever scored 400 in both innings of a Test match, which I just can't believe. But anyway, even though England got 2 big scores, I thought West Indies actually did pretty well to sort of hang in there for as long as they did.
Yeah.
Ben, what is our Charles Tyrwhitt moment of the week?
You're a bit of a Charles Tyrwhitt fan, aren't you, Yas?
Yeah, I've got a couple of shirts that have served me well over the years. I've got a pink number that I'm especially fond of.
Yeah, you got a lovely blue one as well that suits you well. Did you know they've got options for summer as well? Polo shirts in a range of colours, zip necks, chinos and shorts too. They've got loads to choose from.
Well, I'll be sure to check that out. Thanks for letting me know. And listeners, if you fancy updating your summer wardrobe too, we've got a special offer for you. Check out charlestyrwhitt.com or visit one of their stores. And if you use the code Wisden20, you'll get a special discount of 20% off their full price collection. Anyway, Ben, what is our Charles Tyrwhitt moment of the week?
It's Kavem Hodge's maiden Test century, which was a brilliant innings, as you say, a flattish pitch, but had to survive an absolutely brutal spell from Mark Wood, one of the quickest by in England fast bowler in memory, basically, included, according to CricViz, the 2 fastest overs that have been bowled by an England bowler at home in their database. And the
fastest performance over a Test match by an England bowler as well.
Yeah, and he withstood that. He had a good quip at the end of the day in the press conference saying, like, at one point I was telling Mark Wood, like, please, I've got a wife and kids at home, but said that he just relished that battle, and then it all kind of paid off brilliantly. The celebration was great. As he sprinted, he sort of let out this high pitched squeal, basically, is how you could say it, and also gave a good sort of drive by the stump mic. So you got just like this great sort of clip of it, and you had, so at first you have Stokes sort of like sort of shaking his head, being like, what the hell was that? And then he goes past stump mic, so okay, it's because he's making this sound of pure delight and some surprise in there as well. And there's surprise for those of us watching as well. I think he's a 31-year-old guy who had shown glimpses before. He made a good half century in that win at the Gabba. But this is still, before this game, his age was higher than his first class average. Like,
still is.
Yeah, it is a bolt from the blue, and yet it wasn't like a kind of bolt from the blue type of innings where you come out and play some shots, and like it felt actually quite like he batted pretty sensibly. He credited his own sort of resilience after play, and that's what it felt like a guy who was just grinding and making the most of what he could, and is having just like a bit of a he knows his game's having a bit of a peak right now, basically.
And I think it's worth saying as well, I thought England actually bowled pretty well in the West Indies first innings. I don't think they were that sloppy. They were the pitches, the pitch was flat. They were relatively inventive. They allowed there to be run scoring opportunities, but that was because they were trying to take wickets and create chances when the pitch wasn't doing that much for them. So actually, really full credit to West Indies for batting as well as they did.
Well, Athanaze and Hodge, that partnership particularly was not only impressive for repelling England, but then they actually started to dominate, and some of the shots that they were playing. Athanaze has done some work with Lara, right? And you can sort of see that attacking, fluent, languid style. And I thought that was really impressive. Just on the stump mic, it was quite a good Test match for stump mic stuff.
To Silver as well.
Yeah, there was some of that. I don't know if they were turned up more or just West Indies are just having a better time of it in the field, but you could hear them sort of. So Josh De Silva didn't. I can't remember who was batting, but they sent a review upstairs. It was like the worst LBW review ever. Was hitting him outside the line, wasn't hitting another set, and he sort of went into the stump mic and did a bit of Shaggy. It wasn't me, make sure it wasn't. Make sure he wasn't getting tarnished for the worst review ever. Yeah. But it was good, and that 100 moment was good because contrast that with Harry Brook, who got his maiden home ton. He's very understated. I think on commentary, Atherton was saying when he got his debut ton, he was batting with Stokes, I think maybe in Pakistan or Rawalpindi. Yeah. And Stokes was going absolutely wild for him, and then he couldn't understand why Brook was just sort of nonchalantly waving his bat. Yeah. And he was like, "Why aren't you going crazy?" He's like, "I don't do that." And so it's just funny. And yesterday Brook, he didn't really go for it. Was it Pope or was it Brook who did a bit of sort of Bellingham arms out? Maybe it was Root. Was it Root? I can't remember. But they all sort of celebrating quite an understated well. So it was good to see the sort of vibrancy.
I think Brook gives off a vibe. He just expects it.
Yes.
And talking of batters who expect to score big runs, Test match 100, number 32 for Joe Root. He had, Butch said earlier, he had one look at the pitch in the second innings, Jim, and just decided he was going to score 100.
Yeah, it was a pitch.
Which is what you want from Joe Root.
It absolutely was, wasn't it? And it sort of just looked nailed on, and he was just doing his thing where he just quietly accumulates, then plays a lovely shot sort of every 4 overs or so. And it was great to see Brook and Root batting together. You know, the sort of current legend and potential future legend of English batting. I mean, Brook has got all the shots. He's got the white ball game, the red ball game, and like Root, he just has to play his natural game, and he'll get runs, and he'll be able to dominate. I thought that was really, really nice, and there was an element of the impishness about Brook that you could see throughout the innings, and then Root just looked like the sort of old master that he was nailed on for a century. But then Root, when he gets his ton or whatever, he starts getting the ramp out and all that sort of stuff. And I thought Stokes was going to declare. Actually, you remember in the Ashes when he did that when Root was sort of
Root on 120.
Yeah, I was sort of thinking maybe he'll do that. But
Ben, Root nudged past Shivnarine Chanderpaul in the all-time list of leading run scorers in Test cricket. He's 30 odd runs behind Brian Lara, Kumar Sangakkara and Alistair Cook are in his sights too. Where is he going to end up, do you think, the end of his career? Could he catch Sachin?
I think he'll probably end up second. So he'll catch those 3 that you just mentioned this year, unless something bad happens, basically.
Yeah, because England have 10 more Test matches this year.
Yeah. And then next year they've got another 11 tests, 1 against Zimbabwe and then 10 against India and Australia. And towards the end of that is when you'd expect him to sort of go up to the real big dogs, which is Kaz and Ponting. But then even then, Tendulkar's another sort of 2,500 runs ahead, and that would take him to his late 30s, which is not impossible. Obviously, he's just seen Anderson retire at 41. If Root goes until his 41, then maybe it's going to be getting up towards 20,000. Who knows? But I think that Anderson is an outlier for a fast bowler, but also for an England cricketer. England's Test cricketers have not tended to play on that long, especially batters. I don't know what it is. I mean, they do just play a lot of cricket, so you pack the same amount of career into a shorter sort of time span, and you have to go back to basically like Alex Stewart to find the last timer an England batter went on.
Yeah,
really
I was looking
long.
at this yesterday. It is quite interesting. So you're right to pick out Stewart. So Stewart is the only English batter in the 21st century to play a meaningful number of Test matches past their 36th birthday.
But then he also debuted late, so it's
but I was thinking about if you actually go through them one by one, very few of them made the decision themselves to stop. So, for example, players like Bell and Trott, Butcher, Thorpe, these were guys who, Peterson even, the decision was made for them. It wasn't their own decision to stop. Cook, I guess, is the most obvious example of someone who retired early. He was only 33 when
Strauss
he played
as well, I think.
Strauss was still 35,
Yeah.
and runs weren't coming as easy as they were. He also was captain for the end of his career, so it wasn't as if he was never going to do what Root has done, which is quit the captaincy early enough that he has a decent stint back in the ranks, as it were. So I do think the circumstances, I get the point on Cook. Cook's is the closest comparison, but also Cook had, let's be honest, a pretty significant period of time where he wasn't at
I was
his
about
peak.
to say Cook was sort
Root
of a
is
bit
still
feast
averaging
or,
50.
bit feast or famine. He still had the capacity to make like that double 100 in Melbourne or whatever, but then he would have. Root doesn't really do that. If he misses out, as you say, in the first innings, he's going to get one in the second on a pitch like that. He's, other than the Australia thing of not getting a ton down there, he's pretty much done it consistently everywhere.
I guess I wonder if how many of this current lot will call it quits at the end of this Ashes cycle. I guess Stokes, Root, McCullum, Key going higher up.
But do you think that because they're having so much fun now that they don't? I reckon before it was a bit of a they talk about going back to the well and it being a bit of a slog. Now that it's kind of they've stripped away a lot of that sort of pressure, then players might want to play on longer.
Root's got 20 Test matches in this run, and that's obviously a long time. By the end of that run, he'd have played 160 odd Test matches, and as Ben says, he'll almost certainly be number 2 by the end of that stretch. He'd have to have a pretty significant downturn in form to not do that. So I appreciate that's a long period of time, and a lot can change in that time. But I think the way he's playing and the way he has played for the last few years, there's not an obvious reason for him to stop in the same way those other guys did, other than burnout. But as you say, if his schedule is managed in the same way that Anderson's was to the back end of his career, I don't see why. He'd have just turned 35 by the end of that Ashes tour.
Yeah, I guess let's just see how much fun they're having after 10 tests in a row against India and Australia, which does tend to end things for certain Indian cricketers. And also, I guess it just makes that Australia tour just so important, because there doesn't feel like there's any reason why he just shouldn't be able to crack it down there. And he's got a lot of 50s in Australia. But equally, if that tour doesn't go the way that, England want it to, and Root doesn't have a bumper series, and you can also see that tour being sort of like possibly a natural point to move on and look for a new start. We say these things shouldn't be based around the Ashes, but we all know that they are.
But if he sticks around after that series, Sachin is properly in the sights. And also those estimates are relatively conservative about where he'll be in 2 years' time. If he has a year like 2021, for example, then he's getting to second place early next year.
And he's played 142 tests or something like that, Root? And what Sachin did 200
on the
so he's got 60 tests in 4 or 5 years to.
Yeah, England played so many tests, right?
It's a good sort of target to have, really, isn't it? And he's not, he's just signed up for the SA thing. He's not scaling back. He doesn't strike me as someone that, he also looks about 24, so he's not like he doesn't.
Does he? I don't know. I think he went through some sort of aging accelerator
with the captaincy.
Because he looked incredibly young for his age.
Yeah.
Until he was captain, and then by the end of his captaincy, I think he looked his age.
It's like me when I had a kid.
Just on Root, finally, I think Root and Brook as a partnership, 13 innings together, 940 runs, averaging 72. They go at fives. 200 stands and 550 stands. It does feel like one of those partnerships that when Root does finish, we'll look back on it and just think, oh my God, that was amazing.
Yeah. And it was just the way that, Brook comes out, and I think Root's on 1 at that point, but still, Brook at number 5, against the number 4 in a race for Brook to get to his 100 and Root to get to his 50, basically. I think they were on 49 and 99 at the same time. I want to go back to something you said earlier, Yas, about England bowling well, which I think is true in large part, apart from that final wicket, which I do think is worth talking about.
No, definitely.
Because this just is a problem for England overall. So if we go back to what had happened on that third morning, the sky was a bit more overcast. I can't remember if they'd had one of the many ball changes in that game at that point, but whatever the case, the ball was moving as much in that first hour as had done all
Wokes was in a bit of a roll.
Yes, so England took 2 wickets in the first hour, and then Wokes took 2 wickets and 2 balls in the first over after drinks, and then it's down to the last wicket, and then all of a sudden they basically just start bowling differently. Basically, you've got Josh Silver there, who's on about 14 out at the time. Obviously, he's a good player, but he's also a lower order batter who averages 25 in Test cricket, and England at that point just stopped trying to get him out. Basically, they spread the field. There's maybe one slipping by. I don't think there was. And then he sort of does the thing where he just blocks it and then gets a single off the last ball for a few overs, and then starts to open shoulders. And then Shamar Joseph does, and all of a sudden West Indies have added 70 runs. They go to Root for a bit of part-time spin at some point. Finally, it's Wood who manages to get him out. And this is the kind of thing that just I guess it can happen, that the lower order can get away, but also it does happen to England more than any other team, and it's not as if it's a particularly this team issue. I went back to the start of Cook's captaincy. That felt like a fair point to go, and England have the worst record in the world against the last wicket pair in that time. After Afghanistan.
Why do you think it is? Because Stuart Broad was talking about, Stuart Broad had just come out of that England dressing room, and he would have been there when a lot of hefty 10th wicket stands had been scored against England. Why do you think they do what they do? Because it does feel like they just veer off. It feels, as you say, trying
very
to get
anti sort of Stokesian, isn't it? It's sort of weird. They give up getting the set guy out. There must be some logic that they think is in it to do that.
Well, but Broad's interview was really revealing on it. Not interview, when he was just doing his job as a Sky pundit, because he'd just been in the dressing room, and he said basically that obviously you think to yourself, should I just keep bowling as I have been bowling? But then you think, oh well, you might get a bit tired. So basically said that thought is there to bowl as you have been bowling, but they basically just go against it. They just think no, let's go do something different because the guy's going to play it differently. And then didn't have much issue with England's tactics. Said that they could have tried short ball more, but they did try the short ball, and then Shamar Joseph hooked it for 6.
He's not a number 11, by the way. Swivel pulling sort of Mark Wood or whoever. It's he should be up the order a little bit.
And then he said kind of feels like the only reliable tactic is to have like a world-class leg spinner, and it's like doesn't feel like the only reliable tactic against the last wicket pair is if you have Shane Warne, and otherwise you're sort of powerless to to them just to not taking wickets.
I do think it's an area where cricket tactics is lagging, because during the lunch break yesterday, Sky showed highlights of West Indies in England in 2000.
Yeah.
And Ambrose at 9. Jesus. Like, honestly, the standard of tail end batting was so much worse 25 years ago.
Well, Walsh is the famous one. Walsh was described as a man hitting a wasp nest with a broom handle, right, when he was batting.
At least Walsh genuinely batted 11. Like Ambrose was in at 9. and you know, like the standard of tail end batting has increased so much that I don't think teams, especially England, have properly adapted to, you know, you actually very rarely get guys who are useless nowadays. They're all so well trained, so well coached, and they devote so many hours to it. You very, very rarely get guys who can just bowl full and straight, and that'll be it. So
also, they know the value of hanging around. If there is if there is a lower middle order batter there, then they can get. You saw it with Nathan Lyon coming out with his leg completely crocked, you know, and could barely stand. But Australia get another 20 runs in that partnership could be crucial in a fourth innings. So yeah, it's a weird one. It's a weird. I mean, for me, who's a complete idiot, I'm like, why don't they just bowl Yorkers, or do what Jasprit Bumrah does to get people out? But I mean, that stuff is hard. Or why don't you just aim for the stumps?
Or why don't you just do what you do to the top order lot?
Yeah,
is basically how I see it. I know that the tail enders sometimes come out swinging, and then you do want to probably change your plans a bit if that's what they do. But yeah,
I think they're not good enough to nick it.
Yeah, I sort of think that if Josh De Silva's on 25 and he's not going that quickly, you're trying to let's see him do something different before you do something different yourself. If that makes sense. And
it's also what the psychological effect must be on the in batter. When you're like, okay, actually, these guys aren't trying to get me out now. That's great. Like you must feel quite a lot better about yourself if the other team has like stopped trying to try and dismiss you.
Jim, how impressed were you by Shoaib Bashir?
Yeah, I mean, he was great. I mean, and it was after being a bit of a passenger in the Lord's Test, and I think I read something this morning or yesterday about how Stokes had a good half an hour with him, basically just after Lords.
Yeah, there's a very good piece that Vitushan Hantaraja wrote. That was it, yeah. Where a couple of my observations earlier in the podcast about Bashir were from Vish's piece. But yeah,
and he said that. McCullum basically made a joke of it and said, "Oh, this is Bash, by the way," introducing him to Stokes in a sort of because he didn't bowl, didn't score a run, didn't take catch. Yeah, that's an ideal day of cricket for some people, and then go to the pub. But so it was really, really heartening, and he bowled really well. He's got that height and that pace, and he doesn't mind getting smacked over his head. Yeah, the holder wicket particularly, he held his own. After getting hit for a 6 and a 4, and
I think his character does come into it in that he is naturally quite attacking, and he's also quite unflappable. I don't think he really minds getting whacked that much. He sees it as part of the game.
Yeah, and those 2 picks, Jamie Smith as well, who's just been really good behind the stumps because you haven't noticed him. He's pretty much caught everything and done everything. He's looked really neat. So you can see that does become an issue. The dropping or resting or whatever it is of Bairstow and giving it to Jamie Smith. If he fumbles a few catches or he's not good against spin or whatever, then there's questions about Folkes comes back in for the subcontinent or whatever. But no, so Stokes and McCullum have done well with their new picks. One
of the catches Smith took off Bashir was really good, wasn't it? A thick edge off
under edge, yeah. Ben, Somerset have sort of caught some strays, I guess, in that people are looking at Bashir and thinking, how the hell is this guy not getting game time? You, I think, made quite a good point about how Somerset, it's totally understandable how Somerset have played it this year, and Bashir being loaned out, etc., and Leach playing when both are fit.
Yeah, and also up until 2 weeks ago, Somerset wouldn't have known that England were about to make Bashir their first choice spinner. So if they pick Bashir over Leach, then you have a situation where Somerset aren't picking England's first choice spinner. So there's that aspect of it. There's also, should Somerset be playing 2 spinners all the time? I mean, they have had pitches that have enabled them to do that in the past and been punished by the ECB for it. And then also, I think just in terms of the explicit role you need someone to do in the County Championship sometimes, in Test cricket it's different because games go 5 days, which actually wear that bit longer. If you want someone just to hold up an end early in the game, I think
Leach is the best English
probably
bowler
is,
at that.
Yeah, exactly. He is still better at that than Shoaib Bashir, as talented as he is. England also have the luxury of, now having again a brilliant all-rounder in Ben Stokes. They have another guy who can sort of take some overs off the main front liners. Okay, some do have some all-rounders as well, but still, there's still been some times where you could have picked a fault in Somerset. Was it for the first game of the season
when Leach was injured and they still didn't pick Bashir?
Yeah. So there have been times when you can say that hasn't been ideal, but also it's just one of those odd situations that Somerset are good at producing spinners, but often you only need one, and so you then can't pick the guy who's really good. And I think it just ends with Bashir moving to a different county, and that's fine. I don't think we need to get really angry at anyone here.
I definitely see. Sorry, go Jim.
Pardon?
Were you going to say something?
No, I wasn't about to get really angry. No, I was just laughing at Ben.
Okay.
Yeah, he did a funny. Yeah.
I think I felt sorry for Leach a little bit because I was looking up his when Bashir was on a roll in the second innings. I was thinking, how does this compare to other English bowlers in the fourth innings of a home test in recent years? Leach only ever did it twice. Sort of because he makes his debut in 2018. In 2019, he does it twice in the 2019 Ashes and takes 7 for 80 odd in the 2 innings combined, both in London. 2020, Dom Best is the first choice spinner. In 2021, England basically don't play a first choice spinner. Moeen comes into the side for some game, but Leach doesn't play at all. In 2022, that's the first Bazball summer, and England basically chase every game. In the game they don't, they lose by an innings at Lords. And then in 2023, he's injured, and in 2024, he's out the side. So Leach actually basically never got to do what you pick a spinner for in home test matches. And given that it's 6 years since his debut, that's kind of extraordinary.
Yeah.
And of course, in 2018, Leach wasn't in the side, but Rashid and Moeen were ahead of him. So he's
had a crazy England career, Jack Leach, really, hasn't he? I mean, quite unlucky in some ways, and then involved in some real high moments as well. So it's he's slightly unfortunate, and then getting injured at the wrong times and that sort of thing. But he was a real poster boy of Bazball, which was quite interesting. I think he did quite a bit of. I interviewed him a year or so ago, and about all the stuff about he was Stokes' man basically, and he was improving under Stokes, and he wasn't bothered about getting hit, and because he got taken apart by Pant in India, and that sort of affected him a bit. And it's interesting. But I mean, Bairstow too, as we probably covered this before, but they're both sort of, if we're talking about this being Bazball 2.0,
key pillars of Bazball.
Those two guys were very much part of the first sort of iteration, and now it's sort of moving on to a slightly newer crop. So
you could see why Stokes and McCullum are so keen on Bashir. The natural attributes are there in terms of like just I think he bowls at such a good pace that he's able to vary his pace and still be dangerous, if that makes sense. The wicket of Athenaeus was a beauty, but also how attacking he is to right-handers when the pitch is offering something. So do you remember there's that clip when he got selected from nowhere? He was on that Lions camp where they genuinely basically picked every English finger spinner in the country who played in the county championship that year under the age of 24. And Bashir took 6 wickets in the game against like an Afghanistan A team, and basically all of his wickets were against right-handers, turning it from miles outside off stump through the gate. That is something you don't see that many off-spinners do. There are comparisons. There's one ball he bowled yesterday which didn't quite bowl a right-hander, but it just grazed the off bail, basically. And it's very similar to Swan's ball to Ponting in 2009.
Like the dream wicket, basically.
Exactly.
And you can see with the comparison between him and Hartley, who did pretty well as well on the tour of India. Bashir just has that extra bit of pizzazz, basically that extra bit of grip and turn, and he just looks a slightly more complete spinner than Hartley, even though Hartley did pretty decently on the recent tour.
And you can just see it working in Australia was the other thing. Like there are Lion-esque attributes in there, I think, in terms of overspin. And just it's a bit of release height chat again, but that stock off break, even if it's not turning on Australian pitches, might bounce, and that can be a threat as well. So
the 100 starts tomorrow. We talked a bit about the women's competition on last week's Women's Cricket Podcast. Jim, how do you feel about the place of the men's competition in the broader landscape as we head into its 4th year? It could look very different next year. The ECB is actively seeking private investment, effectively selling off half of each team, 49% of each team. It does feel like it increasingly struggles to attract top tier overseas talent. Looking at the names this year, you got a few, Rashid Khan, Adam Zampa, Harris, Ralph, but not many A-listers. I mean, literally since we started recording, we just had a press release drop saying that Finn Allen, the New Zealand opener, has been replaced by Dan Hughes, an uncapped Australian who's done really well in the Blast this year, but it's not exactly names that are going to attract casual cricket fans. But what do you make of where the men's competition?
I think Finn Allen's, he's only out for the first game, so
cool. Well, for one game they've lost Finn Allen.
I mean, what a question already. But I mean, it's there's lots of things at play here. One thing that, I guess, to go off what you just said is Matt Roller did an interview with Pat Cummins that just went out this morning, I think, on Cricinfo, and Cummins is asked about playing in America and his experience and his desire to do that and the whole Silicon Valley thing. But Roller does towards the end just sort of say, had you thought about the 100? And quite pointedly, Cummins, he's not being nasty or anything like that. He just literally, you could just be like, oh, I hadn't actually thought of that. So I think that's quite telling that how low it hasn't cut through to those players.
Loads of Aussies are playing in the MLC.
Yeah. And so the 100, they had a good debate. We're doing a lot of plugging for Sky's coverage, but they did have a good debate on this over the weekend. And Nasser Hussain I tend to agree with quite a lot of what he says, but he was saying the finance stuff just leaves him cold a little bit, and it is a bit of a mess. They want to be able to flog this thing and say that this is fantastic, but actually the feeling is that there's not that much interest, and maybe it'll change. So it'll just be called the 100, but it'll be a 6-ball over competition again, which feels.
The ECB said this morning, they did a press thing. They said that is not currently on the table.
Okay, yeah.
But it does feel like it's in danger of not achieving any of its aims with the men's competition. I think it definitely has brought in fans. If you go to games, you can noticeably feel that there's a different audience. That's definitely a good thing. But I do wonder that the men's competition, which is desperately trying to seek investment at the moment, and part of the reason is why is because they can't compete with the salaries that other competitions have, and it used to be, we've got the Northern Hemisphere summer, so there's not really competition. Well, there is competition now. Caribbean Premier League, Major League Cricket, Lanka Premier League all happen at the same time. Tim Wigmore in the Telegraph wrote a piece last week outlining why investors are put off, and say that they see that majority of counties are pushing to keep full control of cricket operations. There's not enough clarity from the ECB. Counties having veto power over who could buy stakes in teams. Lack of guarantees around England player availability. Fears that it could take decades for buyers to see a return in investment.
It all just feels very messy to me, and I guess the 100 has sort of always felt a little bit like that, a little bit sort of confused or.
The men's competition has, yeah.
Yes,
we're
talking
I think the
about
women's
the
competition does
and
do very well.
I think that's the thing with the finances. I find it very hard to actually. I mean, I'm no finance wizard at all, but to keep up with the intricacies of it, and I think that also detracts from the actual spectacle of the competition as well. Whilst this whole sort of maelstrom of noise is happening, and it will rumble whilst this stuff is going on out the window on the TV. I think it does sort of detract from the entire thing, and again with players dropping out or it not getting that top tier of player, you can see why that will have a bounce on effect for investors. Say, well, you've not got the Indian guys, you've not got your Pat Cumminses or whoever's. They've got some big West Indian names are coming over, right? And each team has a sort of smattering, but it's not. You wouldn't say it's particularly, I don't know what the word is, appointment television or whatever, or
There's a few things here, I think. So what one is with that excellent Tim Wigmore piece about the struggle for buyers to come in, and I don't think it's been properly acknowledged enough just kind of how extraordinary this gift is really to the counties and the MCC who own 100 teams, given a 51% stake in this thing that the ECB say is, and based on evaluations from that offer they got a few years ago. Is worth hundreds of millions of pounds, basically. And in a way, it's not that surprising if you're a county who's given this and you're forward thinking, you're thinking not just about the next, 2 years, but the next 2 decades. I think, well, rather than just getting like a big cash injection now, which also we don't really know, like what are Durham going to do with, or what are some kinds going to do with like 50 million quid right now? It's almost like too much money to think about. And why don't we hold on to this thing, which we're told is worth that, and then just like ride that wave up for the next couple of years. Don't mortgage off your future, basically. And that's not surprising that counties have chosen do that. What another issue? Obviously, you wonder have these been missed the boat slightly with privatization? Like, is there appetite among all the IPL team owners who already own franchises in, as Yas says, CPL, MLC, ILT20, SA20, all of those have lots of IPL team investment. Do they want another competition that is actually in competition with the MLC? They've been okay with it with ILT20, T20, SA20, but there will come a point where there's, they choose to sort of back off. And with the 100 being a bit more complicated, that could be it. There's also, in terms of the players they can get involved. So with that deal that Stokes reported to have signed with SA20, which I think is the second best competition in the world, that's worth 800 grand. And
for 3 weeks.
Yeah,
4 weeks.
And the thing with the 100 is because it has this draft structure, that option's not even available. You can't the top salary band is 125 grand and you can't go above that. So that means you get access to sort of a tier of player, and it's tough to go above that. And you wonder if possibly in the future there could be maybe a privately negotiated marquee signing that they could do, so they can do that, so that they can give the best 8 international players that they can get as much money as they want, basically. And then there's also this time round the sort of club v country thing that's going on with Pakistan. So Shaheen had already pulled out and then was maybe going to take a global T20 Canada deal, but he's now not been allowed to take that. And then also Nazim Shah and who was the other one, Babar Azam, I think. They've both been stopped from taking deals in the 100 because of Pakistan saying, no, we've got too much cricket coming up, you can't play that. So you've got that factor as well. And those are 2 players who, if you add them into the mix, you start looking like those are 2 superstars, and they're not going to be there.
I guess the 100 has 2 competing goals, right? What one is for the having a massive white ball competition that long term generates money, right?
That you own and have the rights to, and you create,
which is basically England is the only major cricket nation that didn't have one pre-100 existing. The Blast, I love the Blast. The Blast can never be that because it's 18 teams, very difficult to follow. The schedule is all over the place. There are tweaks you can make to it, but there is no cricket competition that exists that is that big that really works like that. So I can see why they introduced it for that reason. The other aim is to bring new people in, and I'd ask, they seem to have done that to a degree. And 2, do you need the big names to do that?
I mean, if you're a new person to cricket, you don't know who the big names are, so you just go in along because someone says, "I'll come and do this on an afternoon or an evening," and you see. And I've been to quite a few of the games, and they are good fun and they are a good atmosphere. And maybe it's just us real hardcore cricket fans who know what cricket is like in these other places or was like a few years ago that are comparing and contrasting. So it is a good point. And certainly on the women's side, it is achieving those aims. So this isn't at all a get at the 100 thing. It's just really sort of very gnarly and complicated. It's a complicated thing out there. Will McPherson was on Sky and he was talking about because they have these American sort of, what do they call them? Not recruiters, but like they're going out to sell the 100 to potential investors or whatever. And he was saying, keep an eye on the corporate boxes at places like we are now over the next few weeks, because there may well be some people that are getting schmoozed or coming along to cricket for the first time and seeing it who might be potential investors. So
yeah, I feel like the 100 always provokes very strong reactions. So I'm already anticipating lots of angry messages in the comments. But yeah, I guess the other thing that we don't mention, because it's been the case for 4 years, but a massive part of the 100 and the discourse around it, it's standing in the calendar, right? You got 1 month in July, August, during the summer holidays that is for this competition that hasn't, especially on the men's side, hasn't been nailed yet.
Yeah.
And I think that is something that I think the ECB are so far away from getting right. So I understand why they've done it, but for a lot of cricket fans to have this as the heart of your summer, I can understand why a lot of people are very uncomfortable with that.
But again, just to go back to that other point, people who are new to cricket, they don't really understand that either. They don't understand that this is the county championship is happening in April and September around this thing. They are, if it's a taster for cricket for them. So
I guess it's more the test summer. I think for me, I think the test summer being outside the summer holidays is a real shame.
Last year's Ashes, for example, was all done.
It was done by now, pretty much
5 weeks, and it was before the English school holidays. Yeah.
Ben, there's a new India head coach. It's a recognisable name, but it's one that could bring quite a lot of change for India.
Yeah, and has already brought a fair amount of change. It's Gautam Gambhir, who, you know, people remember from Jeffrey Boycott saying he was absolute rubbish during Test in 2014. You had, you know, a brief peak as a Test batter at the end of the noughties, but it's been sort of a constant figure in Indian cricket and Indian politics since then. Been an MP for a bit of time.
He's a massive figure in India. He's one of those guys who, if you're a casual fan in England, you might not know that much about. You'd remember him from being part of the India team for a while, being good but not great, part of the World Cup winning side. But in India, he's been really, really prominent since he stopped playing. Yeah,
he's done a bit of IPL coaching, but he's also just constantly got a bit of a bee in his bonnet about something. He's had fights with Kohli. Even when he's playing Legends League cricket, he's there calling, Sri Lanka fixer and that sort of thing. So we're in for a fun time, I think, especially after the very serene Rahul Dravid. It's a real turn from that, and you can see that in the big decision he's made in the first squad that's been announced is Suryakumar Yadav is the T20I captain over Hardik Pandya, and obviously Pandya. Okay, he didn't have a great season as Mumbai Indians captain, having had two very, very good seasons as Gujarat Titans captain. But it felt like he was the guy who was being groomed. He was vice captain during the World Cup campaign.
And a good World Cup as
exactly,
well.
Exactly, up there with a player of the tournament contender. They've said it's sort of a fitness thing, and I suppose you might point to the 2023 World Cup when he missed some games through injury, and that is fair enough. But then also they were happy enough to have Rohit as the T20I captain, and he didn't play a whole game throughout 2023. I think what they're looking to is nurture Shubman Gill as potentially an all formats captain. They do just like having that, and this is a bit of an uneasy compromise because in India they don't tend to like split captaincy, and now they've basically got a different captain in the two white ball formats. But yeah, Gambhir, we're in for a fun time, and also maybe the time where we'll get to hear some stuff. They did a press conference ahead of this series, which is not something that they always do. You tend to they'll drop squad announcements at 10 p.m. that say that Virat Kohli is no longer the captain, and it's just 3 tweets in a thread or something. He doesn't have a C next to his name, and it's like, is that a mistake or have they just axed this guy? But we might get a bit more open.
It's quite interesting that he is someone who will do things his own way, and we've already seen him ruffle some feathers, and we could see him ruffle a few more big names as well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and yes, but he did say, so obviously there's been a bit of this history with Kohli. He did give backing to Kohli and Rohit that they want to get squeeze every drop out of them they can. Said the 2027 World Cup is not out of the question. I guess we'll see what happens there. They've made a biggish call in some of the selections as well. I mean, don't need to get into the details of them, but I think largely from a cricketing point of view, the squads look okay, quite reasonably full strength for what is quite a minor series. So I think it's a real chance to sort of be a statement and be like, these are my guys, this is my team, and this is how I plan to take it forward, I think.
And Ireland plays Zimbabwe this week. It's their second ever home test, their first in Northern Ireland, and their first since they beat Afghanistan in Abu Dhabi earlier this year, which was their first ever test match win. We've got a chat with Harry Tector in a bit. Feels like an important moment for Irish cricket. Second home test match so many years after the last one. They're coming back off a win, but off field there are plenty of issues.
Yeah, but it's funny because at the start of the year you're sort of looking at it thinking this test will be the chance for their first ever for their first ever test win, and then they pull off that kind of miracle in Afghanistan. But yeah, lots of issues financially. Talked a lot about finances on this pod, but
it's cricket, eh?
Yeah, but this is an Irish team who's basically they make a loss hosting international cricket at home. Basically, is that to bin off a series against Australia, and you wonder what sort of state cricket's in if a team is having to get rid of such a important series that to try and make some money. One of the things that they want to do to try and help with some of this, so basically whenever they host international cricket, they have to basically build a pop-up stadium when they do, because they just have club grounds at the moment. They want to build sort of a national cricket centre at Abbottstown, I think, as part of sort of a university campus, but that is going to cost a lot of money, might require some government funding, and it's proving tricky to get off the ground, basically. So that is where the finance sit. And there's also stuff with player contracts. They were struggling to get them to sign them before the T20 World Cup. And then they're going to have the issue as well with some of their best players. Tector will be one of them at some point. Or well, he already is one of their best players, but he'll be one of them who faces this dilemma which you see Josh Little already sort of dealing with of Tector will get to the stage where even if it's not IPL level, he will be have deals on the table for him at basically all the sub IPL franchise levels. I think he's that good. And then, he will be able to make a living not playing for Ireland. Then it's how big is the draw of playing for your country. And that is a challenge they'll have to face, I guess.
Well, here is that chat with Harry Tector. Harry, great to have you with us. How's prep going for the Test match?
Yeah, it's been great. Been great. So played 2 first-class games against the West Indies Academy, and then I guess best of Ireland. 2 teams in the Emerald Series. So yeah, it was very good. Good to get, I guess, those sort of overs in. Didn't spend that much time at the crease, unfortunately, but yeah, really excited for next week now.
You're coming into the Test match off the back of the win over Afghanistan earlier in the year, Ireland's first win as a Test nation. How do you reflect on that game? It was an amazing contest. What were celebrations like?
Celebrations were good. Yeah, definitely gave it a celebration worthy of the win. That's for sure. But no, that was just such an amazing few days. I think we played so well away from home in particular. I think the bowlers in particular deserve a lot of the credit because to take 20 wickets, 19 wickets with seam in Abu Dhabi is no mean feat. So yeah, they really did the bulk of the lifting in the Test match, and we managed to get a decent lead. And then Bal and Lorcan batted so well in that second innings to sort of see us over the line. So yeah, it was a historic win and something we were all very proud of and still are. So yeah, it just makes you want to do it again.
A very nervy run chase. It was only 111, but three or 4 early wickets. Definitely was in the balance for a while. I guess I want to know where does Test cricket fit in and around Ireland's ambitions? Because players, an England player would say Test cricket is the pinnacle, and it's easier for them to say that given they play 12 to 15 Test matches a year. But Ireland went nearly 4 years without playing a Test match between the 2019 England Test at Lords and the start of 2023. As a player and as a team, how do you view it around your other goals?
Well, for me anyway, I still think it is, like you said, it's the pinnacle of our game, and we're very lucky to get the opportunity to play it. And for me, I think it's the ultimate test as a player. I find it's so challenging and so rewarding, more so than the other 2 formats. And I think that's what I enjoy the most about it. I feel like there's nothing, fluky about it. If you do well, you earn it. And I think that element of the game, I really enjoy. Yeah, for me, I guess I can only speak for myself, but for me, it's right up there.
How do you compare it to, a really good 50-over win? You've had a lot of success in 50-over cricket. Why is it that playing a Test match? Because you're 24 years old. There are a couple of surveys done recently where players around your age around the world are not viewing Test cricket in the same way as, say, players did 10 years ago.
Yeah, that's a good question. To be honest, I think it's just trying to find the balance for a lot of players. For some players, maximizing their earnings and playing T20 franchise cricket, if it presents itself, is most important, and would hold no qualms with anyone for trying to earn as much money as they can, and that's fine. But for me personally, yes, I've enjoyed all the franchise cricket I've played, and going to try and continue to get better as a player in all 3 formats. But for me, I think Test cricket is just so fun and rewarding, and yeah, I think that's where I want to test my game at, because I think that's the best sense of where you are as a batter, in my opinion. So yeah, I think that's why I enjoy it so much, because it is so challenging and rewarding if you can bat well.
How do you go about improving your game on an individual level, just in terms of, because you don't play that much Test cricket, and even from a first class point of view, you've not played as much first class cricket as you would have played the other formats? Yeah,
it's hard. It is really hard, because you're kind of trying to figure it out on the fly, and for me, like, a lot of my success has come in white ball cricket. So then you're kind of trying to draw off that, and trying to, I guess, like transfer your technique and that sort of things from maybe one day cricket more so into Test cricket, and just hope that your technique or my technique holds up to that level, which I think it can. But the concept of batting for a long period of time, I think, is the most challenging for me. Like I think I have the technique to do it, and I do think I have the mental fortitude, I guess, to bat for a long period of time. But I think that's the biggest challenge, because I haven't done it that much, and so much of the cricket that we play, you're under time pressure to score runs as quick as you can. So transferring your mindset to being able to try and bat for a long period of time without getting out, I think that's the biggest challenge.
Sort of fast forwarding your career 10, 15 years, what would you say are the big personal ambitions? Is playing more Test cricket, driving in Test cricket, World Cup qualifications, playing in county cricket, franchises? The reason why I ask is because a player in your position the future could look very different compared to, again, a player 15, 20 years ago.
Yeah, I guess that's a hard question to answer. I think I'd like to think that in 10 years, the game in Ireland will certainly be in a stronger place from grassroots to the international level than it is right now. I'm not saying that it's not strong right now, but in terms of facilities, infrastructure, pathway, and domestically, I think if all that's in a better place for people coming through, that would be brilliant. So that's probably broad picture. Personally, I don't know. There's so many things. Like, I'd love to play in a 50-over World Cup. That would be a massive goal of mine to do that. I know the Olympics would be cool. I'm not sure how that's going to play out in terms of qualification or how many teams, but we train in the same facility as all the Irish Olympians that the Dublin-based guys do. We're all in the same hub. So seeing the buzz around that the last sort of year or two, and even the last couple of weeks, has been amazing. The hype around the country is just so exciting for the Olympics, because we've got probably the most medal contenders ever for Ireland. So I think that would be amazing. That would be so cool. But then, there's, so many personal goals, as a batter that you want to achieve. But fundamentally, I'd just love to be, if I can be in 10 or 15 years time, comfortable, because I'll probably have retired by then, hopefully. If I'm comfortable knowing that I gave my best and I tried to become the best player that I could be, whatever may come of that may come. But I'd be happy if that was the case.
Obviously, Irish cricket's in the news a fair bit at the moment, and the series against Australia being postponed, the series against South Africa being played in the UAE. Are these things that you guys talk about much in the dressing room?
Yeah, it does get spoken about. Yeah,
and do people have views on like wider questions, like how not just I want to play more Test cricket with Ireland, but how that might happen, and decisions and in terms of how Irish cricket moves forward, that sort of thing?
Yeah, well, I think fundamentally all those decisions come from a cost efficiency point of view. I mean, losing a series against Australia is very disappointing. To get or to have had the opportunity to play against the world champions at home in Ireland would have been amazing. And to be honest, it's just a bit disappointing, because we play so much of our cricket away from home. And then we've only played 2 home series at home in the last 2 years. So that's disappointing. Because you want to play in front of your fans, and, we mightn't sell out Lords the way England do, but, we can still get a decent crowd into our grounds. And it's nice to play in front of home crowds with home support, because we so rarely do it. So that is disappointing, to be honest. So, but yeah, I can understand why it happens. Money doesn't grow on trees. And, Cricket Ireland are very much at the, I guess, the whims of the ICC in terms of funding, or a large majority of our funding anyway. So I do understand it. And, if that's the most cost efficient way for us to play cricket, then that's what has to happen. But yeah, it's disappointing.
Is it frustrating seeing that there is so much money involved in cricket at the moment, and it's such a big deal for Ireland to have a home series in front of your own fans against Australia, and there's so much money out there, and it's just like, there's so much around cricket. People are talking about, I've got England West Indies on the TV in front of me, and lots of people talking about West Indies not being given enough money to have a proper pre-series build-up, for example. There are lots of examples in cricket of smaller nations, financially speaking, not having the financial support when you look at the money out there. There is money out there for stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't frustrate me, not really, because I think you earn it to a degree. Like if I think if we were playing better or a better team, having bigger results, and probably more money would come through sponsorship and ticket sales and all the other stuff. So like that's the way it works. But then it's kind of like the chicken and the egg, isn't it? Because how do you get better results without better infrastructure? Like that's pretty much it. And without that, you need the investment to do it. So it's a hard question to answer. But no, it doesn't frustrate me. I do think that if you play better and you get more results, we'll probably get more money. Like I think that is how it works. So no, it doesn't frustrate me. It's disappointing sometimes, but I do understand it.
And finally, how much are you looking forward to that test against Zimbabwe?
Oh, it's going to be amazing. Yeah, it's going to be so much fun. First test in Ireland in like 6 years after there's only been one. So and first test in Northern Ireland as well. So they've been crying out for more cricket in the north of Ireland. So it's going to be brilliant and a truly historic occasion to play Zimbabwe. And they're a team who we've actually had quite a good rivalry with over the last number of years. Certainly since I've made my debut, we've played them a lot and always tight games, and expect this to be no different. So yeah, it's really exciting. And like I said, to be playing in Ireland in front of our fans, hopefully there's a good turnout up north. And yeah, it's going to be really exciting, to be honest. I'm really looking forward to it.
Awesome. Well, best of luck against Zimbabwe, and hopefully you can make it 2 out of 2.
Yeah, thanks so much.
We have another live show coming up, this time in Birmingham. It's our first non-London live show, so we're very excited for it. Butch will be there, as will a yet-to-be-announced special guest. It's on Thursday, the 12th of September, just after the end of the final test of the summer at Hockley Social Club. Tickets are £15. Great value. Promises to be a really fun night. Link to the tickets in the description below. Cool. That is everything for today's show.
It's not everything, Yas. You have a game of cricket to tell us about.
Oh yeah, well remembered. So I like
well remembered.
He definitely didn't tell us to ask him about it and leave 15 minutes conveniently at the end.
No.
It's good acting.
Lies, all lies. So I was playing a timed game, and I normally moan about timed cricket. So it's 100 overs a side, sort of. There's a rule that if you get your overs in by 20 past 6, you get a few more overs. So basically, if you bat first, the only way you can win is if you bowl your oppo out. And we had them 31 for 5 after like maybe 15 overs, maybe even fewer. And then their like numbers 6 and 7 were batting defensively and very well for a very long time. We didn't look like getting a wicket,
blocking the shit out of it, basically.
Yeah, but like,
and how long would they have to do that for?
They would have had 35 overs to not lose their last 5 wickets. But like there was a very long period where we didn't look like even creating half a chance.
Well, did you do what Stokes does? How did you cope in those circumstances? Did you?
Well, we had a drinks break, and we had an emergency brains trust meeting where we decided. To the off spinner who was getting quite a bit of turn, we thought we're not going to get a caught slip, caught leg slip or caught short leg is the one, and
two right-handers,
and we put in a guy under the lid, which we never do, never ever do, and by process of elimination, we chose our short leg, and he took an unbelievable one-handed. Left-handed catch diving forward. Yeah. The guy defended it pretty well.
Off the face of the bat.
And it just sort of popped up a little bit, and he dived forward onto the pitch.
Ponting used to be great at those off the face of the bat.
But the thing was, it was like the most I think I ever get to feeling what it's like to be in a test match, where I was like properly blocking it. And like,
Was that the final wicket, or
no,
that was the partnership breaker?
It was the one that opened things up, and their lower order actually were really good. So we basically just like gave them loads of gaps in the field and like go on then, and they did actually take on. So they needed like 150 from like 22 overs, whatever, from that point, and they did genuinely make a pretty good fist of it.
Yeah.
But we ended up winning with like, I think 6 overs or 5 overs to go. But I normally really dislike time cricket because you get nonsense scenarios where you score more runs than the opposition and you don't win a game and stuff like that. But in situations like that, I guess the flip side of it is they were 31 for 5 chasing 200 in a 50 over game. That is just done.
Yeah.
Whereas the fact that it was a time game left it open.
Yeah.
And because we're quite close to each other in the league, there was real incentive for them to just not lose and just deprive us of the win. So that was a rare instance. I'm generally anti-time cricket, but that was a rare instance where I think time cricket was quite good.
But also you delivered your it was your Flintoff Ring of Fire moment, when he calls them in and he puts Johnny Cash on the stereo, and
I didn't do that.
They all take the tops off and the rest and wheel them round the head.
Absolutely none of that. Absolutely none of that.
And what did you get, Yas, most morning?
Oh, thanks for asking. 7.1 overs, 2 maidens, 4 for 13. Thank you very much. So yeah. But anyway,
he told me to ask that. He told me to ask that as well. So yeah.
I did not do that. Anyway, that is everything for today's show. Cheers, Jim. Cheers, Ben. This has been the Wisden Cricket Weekly podcast. We'll be back later in the week with the Women's Cricket Weekly episode. Kia wants to help you get closer to the action and create inspiring memories that will last a lifetime. Last year, Kia launched a competition to give young cricket players the opportunity to play at the inspiring Kia Oval. And this year, they want to do it all over again. The Kia Young Cricketer competition is an amazing experience for 11 to 16-year-olds to live out their cricketing dreams. The day will consist of a morning coaching session from Surrey's fantastic coaching team to an afternoon tournament on the iconic outfield itself. If you are aged 11 to 16 and want to experience this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity on September the 14th, all you need to do is enter by the link in the description.